Show him. Listen. What is that?
It's your Stargate.
Hello, I'm Vincent Price. I'm here to introduce a new chilling series of classic ghost stories.
There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to man.
Throughout human history, people have reported seeing dark, shadowy, human-like figures stalking from afar.
Something forcefully took Dennis Martin off that hill. And nobody will talk about it.
Every fifth call I go on, I end up running across a set of stairs.
Hello?
Have you checked the children?
By the end of the war, the Americans started to realize that the Germans had fantastic technology.
In 1989, Al Bielek came forward to reveal his participation in the astonishing Philadelphia experiment and that he had survived time warping.
And I've said it many times, folks, we are at war. Those who are managing it and controlling the people while it happens are those who are masquerading as government.
When you look at the map, could we be looking at the remnants of the members of an ancient worldwide civilization?
The grand architecture. Who built all this? Ladies and gentlemen, just a word of warning. If any of you are not convinced that you have a tingler of your own, the next time you're frightened in the dark, don't scream.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Spooky Sundays. My name is Dr. Crocko. I'd like to welcome everybody back to the channel. I'm glad you found me over here. Tonight is a very interesting topic as we'll be looking into portals, parallel universes, other dimensions, gateways to the gods, glitches in the Matrix, whatever you want to call it. Since the beginning of recorded history, people have spoke about portals, ways to enter other dimensions. This goes back to ancient Egypt. This goes on before that, from the beginning of what some think is time. Now, in this episode, we will explore many different things, from the ancient Egyptian portals to portals existing in mountains, caves, rock formations, some that just pop up out of the blue, people that feel like they're experiencing something known as the Mandela effect, people that think they just caught a glitch in the Matrix one day. Did our ancestors know how to open a portal to another dimension? There are a number of areas across the world known to be energetic hotspots, from ancient megaliths to ley lines. These are often alleged to produce hyperdimensional gateways. While we don't exactly know how to open a portal to another dimension, there is evidence the phenomenon could exist, and now it seems science may be catching up on the possibility. Typically, portal areas have some type of electromagnetic significance and are located near large deposits of quartz or other minerals with piezoelectric properties. So it came as less of a surprise when NASA announced in 2012 that the University of Iowa physicist Jack Scudder found hard evidence of portals created by interaction between Earth and the sun's magnetospheres. These portals are extremely volatile and unpredictable, opening and closing in the matter of an instant. But Scudder found markers called X points, or electron diffusion regions, which allowed NASA probes to locate and study them.
About 50 miles away from Dulce, New Mexico, as the crow flies, is the largest and highest valley in North America. Called the San Luis Valley, it sits at over 8,000 feet above sea level. The valley has been known for a long time to be a place where many strange events occur. It has been rumored that there are portals to other dimensions in the valley. What's going on in this mysterious valley?
The San Luis Valley is in south central Colorado, and it actually, geologically, it extends down to Taos, New Mexico. So it does actually go below the Colorado-New Mexico border. However, the Colorado portion is known as the San Luis Valley. The lower portion is not, even though it is part of the same valley system.
When I say window area, I mean a place that seems to have a preponderance of paranormal activity, be it UFOs, Bigfoot, poltergeist activity, whatever. And often, strangely enough, and a lot of people probably watching know this, all those things at once.
We describe it as the playground of the paranormal because not only are the deposits just enormously vast there, but you have daily, non-stop paranormal activity occurring.
And this is something not unique to this one specific portal. What we hear about a lot is these portals kind of just entering our reality or opening up, however they work. No one's quite sure. There's no rhyme or reason why they would show up at a specific time and not another time. Many instances you hear about somebody entering a portal, being able to come back, never finding that portal again. We're going to go through a lot of stories today, a lot of specific, a lot of fun, entertaining stories that I think you guys are just going to love. So I'd like everybody to sit back and relax and enjoy this week's Spooky Sunday. Let's talk about interdimensional portals to start. Let's get a good basis on where we're at. The interdimensional portal has long been a device of what most people call science fiction, but it also finds a place within myriad ancient cultures. According to Freddie Silva, throughout history, we've slowly lost our connection to Earth, but in times of antiquity, people were able to naturally distinguish energetic fields and hotspots across the land. Our ancestors identified particular places considered energetically anomalous. And in those areas, one finds either a succession of temples or a temple that has withstood the test of time. Silva points to a number of Gothic cathedrals built on grounds originally identified by pagans as being sacred. These energetic locales are considered sacrosanct because they represent areas where our inner temple, the mind, is able to access higher states of consciousness, connect with the extra-dimensional entities, or evoking out body experiences. Whether these areas always represented dimensional portals for the mind or a portal for the physical body is always up for debate. Famous archaeologist and author Graham Hancock references the many stories of native shamans traversing planes of consciousness through the use of psychedelic substances such as ayahuasca. You can go meet the demons, meet the gremlins. Within this ecstatic state, shamans report meeting teachers and guides who provide advice and wisdom for living within the everyday realm of our existence. This could also be meeting a god. This could be interpreted many different ways. Because Hancock also says he believes it is worth considering that there may be something otherworldly to these portal areas, something beyond materialist comprehension. Now, one location that seems to fit this description is Puerto de Hayumarca in Peru. Situated on a plateau just off the western banks of Lake Titicaca, Puerto de Hayumarca translates to Gate of the Gods. Reaching 23 feet in height and width, Hayumarca appears to be a doorway to nowhere, carved into the rock face in a remote area known as the Valley of Spirits or Stone Forest. Here's a good image of what I can only describe as a portal. Legend has it, when Spanish conquistadors came to Peru to look at the Incas' gold, a priest named Amaru Maru used Hayumarca as a portal to escape. Maru allegedly placed a golden disc known as the Key to the Gods of Seven Rays into a socket in the center of Hayumarca's carved door, opening a portal and allowing him to walk through the stone, never to be seen again. Now, Hayumarca rests on a ley line, upon which the famous gate of the Son of the Tiwanaku also lies, in neighboring Bolivia, along with several other important Incan archaeological points. Visitors of Hayumarca have reported noticeably unusual energy fields there, with some saying they can feel pulsating energy emanating from the rock when placing their hands in its center. Many who have reviewed the ancient site online mention this feeling of elevated or intense energy there. Now, Lake Titicaca nearby was revered by the Incas and considered to be the birthplace of their civilization. It is also among the deepest lakes in the world, rumored to contain a lost city and a plethora of treasure looted by the Spanish. In 2000, the lost temple of Atahualpa was discovered deep below the lake, adding to the mysterious nature of this ancient culture. In more recent lore, a man named Jose Luis Delgado was said to have rediscovered Hayumarca in 1996, astonished by what he saw. The Gateway of the Gods looked familiar to him, as he had seen a similar threshold in his dreams with pink marble. Delgado knew instantly this was the same vision from his reveries. And he said, "When I saw the structure for the first time, I almost passed out. I have dreamed of such a construction repeatedly over the years, but in the dream, the path to the door was paved with pink marble, and with the pink marble statues lining either side of the path. In the dream, I also saw that the smaller door was open, and there was a brilliant blue light coming from what looked like a shimmering tunnel." Was he once somebody that passed through this portal, or is he experiencing what most would call deja vu, just a coincidence?
In 1988, an old Kurdish shepherd who went by the name of Savak Yildiz accidentally made a discovery in the ruins of Göbekli Tepe that helped rewrite our understanding of Turkey's ancient history and even the world. Here, Yildiz uncovered a set of two sculpture-like objects buried beneath what was merely considered a Byzantine-era cemetery. For a short while, this anomaly remained a mystery until 1994, when an international team of scientists performed a full excavation of the site. Based on everything we know about how modern civilization got its start, this location should simply not exist. The excavation team learned that the entire location of this Byzantine-era cemetery was not at all what it seemed when evidence of a far older civilization began to surface. At first, the new dating of Göbekli Tepe was pushed back to before the Byzantine era began, circa 300 AD, then further back by another 10,000 years, and then further still to the beginning of time itself, at least according to some fringe archaeologists, with the site being identified as the literal location of the Garden of Eden. Of course, Göbekli Tepe is not that old. However, it is old enough to contradict our current understanding of the evolution of man, since its construction is anachronistic in nature. It exists out of time. What is built here is simply too advanced for the Neolithic era humans of that period, and thus has even been linked to the ancient Sumerian civilization. When viewed from above, the ruins correlate with the Pleiades star system. On the ground, it features several rings of huge T-shaped stone pillars, each engraved with the carving of an animal. Two of the pillars sit in the middle of these circles, almost creating an archway of sorts. Some theorists believe that the archway within these circles are said to be the remains of a type of gateway that can transport people of the planet, with some archaeologists noting an apparent similarity between this site's marking with that of the Gate of the Gods in Hayumarca in Peru, on the other side of the planet. Interestingly, the Inca people also spoke of a connection to the people from the Pleiades star system. According to some alternate theorists, the site's strange attributes are evidence of ancient alien technology that can be studied and reverse engineered. They state that significant finds of Göbekli Tepe and a number of other ancient sites across Turkey have caused the country to become a major focal point for Western attention due to the ancient technology buried beneath these locations, and that this technology could even be of Sumerian origin. Why is this Sumerian link important? Situated in now what is modern-day Iraq, the ancient Sumerians were one of the planet's first advanced civilizations, and for a time worshipped the Anunnaki, giant humanoid deities. However, popular writers like Zakaria Sitchin post that the Anunnaki were not literal gods, but extraterrestrials who helped build, develop, and turn pre-Iraq into a technologically superior society.
Now, to explain what some people that look into topics like this and other researchers may believe to be portals, you have to start with the gods that were worshipped and what the capabilities of them were. Now, a liminal deity is a god or a goddess in mythology who presides over thresholds, gates, or doorways, a crosser of boundaries they call them. Special types include dying and rising deities, various agricultural deities, and those who descend into the underworld, crossing the threshold between life and death, representing the most fundamental of all boundaries. Now we can talk about the Lake Titicaca Gate of the Gods that we were referencing. Like I said, the Indians in the area call it the City of the Gods, even though there is no city there, ancient or modern. According to Native American legends, heroes of the past went through that door to meet their gods. By going through the door, they gained immortality and a life next to the gods. The stories also mention that a few of those men returned to Earth through the gate with their gods in order to inspect their kingdoms. The gate was a gateway to the land of the gods. Now another legend describes the story of Amaru Maru, an Incan priest of the Temple of the Seven Rays. It is said that in order to escape the Spanish, he left the temple with a golden disc, known as the Key of the Gods to the Seven Rays, and went to hide in the mountains of Hayumarca. Aramamaru eventually used the golden disc during a ceremony with other priests. The door opened, he went through, and according to legend, was never to be seen again. Now, there are many stargates and hidden portals on Earth and in space, it is to be believed. One of NASA's spacecraft, the Themis, and cluster probes from Europe have amassed enough observational data to confirm that a magnetic stargate portal exists in many locations. Now, we hear about many different things, many different places where people travel and start experiencing anomalies. They call some of these the Devil's Triangles, most famously the Bermuda Triangle. It's probably the most famous stargate portal, encompassing 3 vertices. The Bermuda Triangle, sometimes referred to as Devil's Triangle, is a large abyss that stretches between San Juan, Puerto Rico, Bermuda Island, and Miami, Florida. First noted in late 1950 or early 51, the Bermuda Triangle was deemed to be a mysterious area in which huge military ships and planes were, quote, lost without any other plausible explanation forthcoming from the government or military. In 1964, Vincent H. Gaddis argued that the Bermuda Triangle was the site of strange occurrences such as disappearing tanker ships and jets, with the government being unwilling or unable to provide a reason or explanation. We did an episode on the Philadelphia experiment and the Montauk Project. This involved them sitting in a chair that acted as if it was a portal or some kind of way to reach into another dimension.
By the way, Daniel did say that the stargates are real, that there's one main stargate per planet, that they dug them up from ancient Atlantean technology. They actually buried it under the ice in Antarctica because they were concerned that something would come through that could damage human life. So that is real. Stargate SG-1, all those television shows, of which there's 10 seasons, the first and second year of Stargate SG-1 are remarkably loaded with real stuff. And there's even an episode of Stargate called Wormhole Extreme, and you remember that one? Where they're making a fake television show about a real Stargate program. It's like this inside tongue-in-cheek joke. And everybody watching the show kind of knows, okay, they're telling us something here. There's something real behind all this stuff. Well, it's true. Why do they do that? Okay, that's a very good point. The reason why they do that is that you hide the truth out in the open, so that if I go into this lecture and I'm telling you all this stuff, you can just say, oh, well, he's just into Stargate. You know, he's just watching television shows. But in fact, this was really cool. One time, I was sitting down with Daniel one day, and we're talking about the looking glass, and this has a little orb that appears when you're looking at a particular place, and it's a ball of light. So they gave it this really weird name. They call it an outer band individuated teletracer. Okay? Outer band individuated teletracer. And they shortened it to the word OBIT. Outer band individuated teletracer, an OBIT, right? So then we're thinking, all right, this is what they always do, right? They hide this shit out in the open. Let's go Google outer band individuated teletracer and see if there's anything there. I couldn't believe it when we went on Google after he just told me this. He had no idea either. And boom, Outer Limits. There's an episode of the Outer Limits called Outer Band Individuated Teletracer. And it's all about this stuff. There was a show. He was actually really interested in me, too, because I seem to have some sort of psychic connection to these things. He says to me one day, what do you think a TVG is? I said, time vector generator. How did you know that? You're right. I don't know. Yeah. So I did not go to Montauk. I've never sat in the chair. Somebody asked me that. Were you in the chair? No. I was just very, very fortunate by some kind of crazy synchronicity to meet this guy. I wish he would go forward, but he doesn't want to. He did tell me, by the way, that they have found life on other planets. He said that the moon Io around Jupiter has little creatures crawling in the rocks. He said that Mars once had a civilization, that they've actually had astronauts on Mars, that they have a photograph that he saw of these astronauts waving with a big pyramid next to them. They actually have underground bases on Mars. There's a technology we've learned about from other witnesses now called a jump room, where you walk into the room, it's like an elevator, the doors close, you suddenly feel really sick to your stomach, the doors open, and boom, you're on Mars. Just like that. No.
Now, strange mysteries seem to gravitate to some places, and oddness and enigmas gather about them like flies to a rotting corpse. Here in these realms of the strange, we can find the mishmash of legends, myths, and real cases of the unexplained. Perhaps all of it congealing together into some vague idea of what the truth may be. One place that has proved to be the ground zero for some truly bizarre stories is a mountain that lies in one of the most beautiful spots in Europe, and which perhaps cloaks its real, sinister nature in a veneer of natural magnificence. Now, located amongst the Alps, which straddle the border between Berchtesgaden, Germany, and Salzburg, Austria, and looming over the Salzburg Basin and the Salzach Valley, a tabletop mountain, technically a massif, known as the Uttensberg, which directly translates to the Undermountain. Most famous for its lopsided shape and for being featured in the beloved musical film The Sound of Music, and rising around 1,973 meters, it's about 6,500 feet, over its surrounding vistas, the mountain became a commanding presence and is a popular destination for tourists from nearby Salzburg, Austria, who come here to see the stunning natural splendor on display and enjoy a myriad of outdoor activities. Kind of give you a look at what we're talking about here. And I can make this a little bigger for you guys. Hope everyone's enjoying the show so far. We're going to be bouncing back and forth to topics. It's going to be a really fun show. Let me make this a little bigger for you guys. It's beautiful, breathtaking, right? That is the Uttensberg. The majestic formation, with its vast natural beauty, also has a range of strange legends associated with it, such as that it is the resting place of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, who is said to slumber there awaiting a resurrection that will herald in the end of the world. And another well-known legend saying that the great King Charlemagne lives on or within the bowels of the mountain, surrounded by dwarf-like creatures called the Uttensberg Manden. Indeed, the mountain has long been said to be inhabited by various demons, spirits, strange beasts, lost civilizations, and dwarf-like beings. It was legends such as these that allegedly drew the attention of Hitler, who by some accounts became absolutely obsessed with the mysterious mountain, building a house on nearby Mount Berghof on the Austrian border, from which he purportedly fanatically watched the Uttensberg with special high-powered telescopes. It is said that he believed the mountain held supernatural energies and entities that he hoped to harness and tame for his own purposes. Whether the mountain truly holds such paranormal secrets or not is unknown, but there are certainly various tales of high strangeness from here. Mixed in with the legends and lore, Uttensberg has become known as a place of very steeped in the world of weird. One persistently reported phenomenon from here is that of missing time. This is something you hear associated with UFOs and alien abduction, but you hear this story, they just attribute it to that sometimes. What's really bizarre about missing time is the person really does not know where a big chunk of time went. They know they were in a specific spot and at a specific time. The next time they are aware of their surroundings, it is several hours later, and they can't comprehend what happened. But this is a phenomenon that we see here, and also suddenly finding oneself in a different area without any explanation, as if one has been spontaneously teleported. Hikers have reported losing consciousness and then waking up in unfamiliar parts of the mountain, with minutes or hours missing and unaccounted for. In some of these odd reports, the person has inexplicably traveled many miles away with the span of just a few minutes. And such tales have stirred up speculation, including that the mountain holds vortices of some sort that have the power to teleport people, time warps, or these are the victims of alien abductions, which would be somewhat fitting considering Uttensberg is a hotspot for UFO sightings as well. Now, one of the weirdest stories concerning the anomalies of the missing time and teleportation at Uttensberg was described by the Austrian author himself, Stan Wolf, his pen name, in a 2011 book titled Gems of Dominion, Mysterious Mount Uttensberg, which would end up expanding to encompass a full 6 volumes. Wolf claimed that he actually went to the mountain with a friend and actively searched for these time slips, actually finding some locations where their watches would diverge by seconds or minutes. You hear this a lot with the Devil's Triangle and the Bermuda's Triangle. You hear all the time that their instruments start glitching out. We also hear this because of the electromagnetic activity in the area. That's why they think that it's being like that. But all of these things start to line up for these weird, anomalous places around the Earth. But this author, after exploring more of the area, Wolf says that they came across a group of men living in one of the many caves of the mountain, and that these people claimed to be SS soldiers from World War II, still young and under command of the General Hans Kammler. Bizarrely, the alleged soldiers appeared to have had no idea that so many years have passed and seemed to truly believe that the war had ended only months before. Wolf then ascertains that the cave they had been hiding out in displays a major temporal anomaly, with time passing by at a much slower pace within its confines. Wolf's explanation for the time anomalies is every bit as far out as the phenomena itself. He claims that in 1220, a group of the Knights Templar returning from the crusade was in the wilds of the Mesopotamia, when they suddenly encountered an apparition in the form of the goddess Isis, who instructed them to build a dwelling upon the fairway Uttensberg. The goddess then supposedly gave them strange black gems called the Gems of Dominion to take with them. The knights did as they were told and constructed a temple for Isis within a cavern in the mountain, after which she would appear again with a series of prophecies and information concerning a variety of secret knowledge, such as the location of the Holy Grail. It is in these Gems of Dominion that are said to have the power to slow down time, amongst various other abilities. It is important to note that while the books are presented as strange fiction, they are also advertised as based on true events, and the author himself cryptically suggests that they are the truth merely masquerading as fiction, saying himself, "Many things are too unfathomable to write them down like that. Perhaps they even should stay hidden forever, for the human mind accepts only what it is familiar with. Therefore, I am writing this book in the disguise of a novel. It is up to each reader to decide what he will acknowledge as true. And just like you guys, it's up to each viewer to ascertain what you think is true." Now, I'd like to move on to a story, really jumping topics here, called The Mysterious Tale of the Man from Torrid. Now, the story of the Man of Torrid begins quite specifically in many sources with a hot day, July 1954. On that particular day, a man was said to have arrived at Haneda Airport, known as Tokyo International Airport. This man has been described as Caucasian with a beard. While his primary language is said to have been French, it has been purported that he spoke Japanese and many other languages as well. So far, there's nothing extraordinary to note. The sequence of events that then differs according to which version of the story one encounters. In one version, the man hands over his passport to be stamped, and the Japanese immigration officer notices something strange. Now, while the passport looked authentic, the country where it was issued, Torrid, was recognized as non-existent, either by the officer or one of his colleagues, indicating that the man should be taken away for interrogation. In another version, The man mentioned he was from Torrid, and when the immigration officer did not believe him, he showed him his passport. Now, the next part of the story details the man trying to convince the immigration officer that Torrid does indeed exist. According to the traveler, Torrid was located between France and Spain and had been there in existence for about 1,000 years. When shown a map, the man pointed to the area occupied by the Principality of Andorra and was puzzled as to why his country was called Andorra on the map. Both sides refused to give in. The Japanese officers insisted that Torrid did not exist. And I have a short clip here from the channel Bedtime Stories, who gets into the story of the man from Torrid. It's a very interesting story. Just give me 1 second to pull this up for you guys. Now, this channel is called Bedtime Stories, and all the channels and clips that I provide, I will be crediting the channel by telling you, and I will also be adding in the pinned comment all of the links, and those should be up by tomorrow morning. So please check out these channels that I'm sharing. They deserve all the credit for the work they did.
The multiverse, a hypothetical state of infinite realities, all existing together at the same time. It was a term first coined by American psychologist William James in 1895, albeit in an entirely different context to the one we know today. He referred to a moral multiverse rather than a physical one, something he called a world of plasticity and indifference. It would take almost 60 years for his contribution to the English language to become mainstream, and only after it was hijacked in 1952 by eminent Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger to describe the possibility of alternate universes. Although as off the wall as it was groundbreaking, it was a concept Schrödinger, and other physicists for that matter, had been toying with for many years, and was even lightly touched upon in his now famous thought experiment known as Schrödinger's cat. He hypothesized that throughout a person's life, they may be faced with millions of different choices, which could lead to millions of different outcomes. That each time one of these proverbial crossroads is arrived at, the universe splits into several possible branches based upon the decisions available to the individual at that moment in time. These branches then go on to coexist as separate spacetimes. Given the amount of life forms on planet Earth, let alone in the universe at large, this would result in the existence of an infinite number of alternate universes. The distance between these universes could be anything from a couple of nanometers to billions of light years, and would in fact be irrelevant, as there is no way they could ever interact with each other. Or is there? Whilst many physicists are still on the fence regarding the possibility that we exist as part of a multiverse, and it is strictly a hypothetical concept, history is littered with accounts of people who have supposedly travelled to alternate realities, or have arrived from them. And one of the most striking examples on record is a case known as the man from Torrid. On a scorching summer's day in July 1954, so the story goes, a passenger airliner touched down at Haneda Airport in Tokyo, Japan during the late afternoon. The sun was still high overhead as the passengers disembarked. They were mostly Japanese, perhaps returning from holidaying in other parts of the world, but some of them were European. They immediately set about collecting their luggage and made their way through to customs in that rushed and haphazard way only world-weary travellers seem to exhibit. As far as the airport officials were concerned, it was just another mundane day at the office. However, one passenger in particular had caught their attention. He was a slender, well-dressed European man carrying a leather-bound briefcase along with his luggage. His primary language was French, although he could also speak Japanese as well as a few other languages, and he told officials that he was visiting on business. They had no reason to disbelieve him. He certainly didn't look like a tourist. But when he handed over his passport, things began to take a somewhat bizarre turn. He presented to them an official-looking document of impeccable condition, which had travel stamps from several other nations, including Japan. What struck them as odd, however, was his country of origin, proudly emblazoned on his passport in bold lettering as Taured. None of the officials recognised this name, and whilst they didn't doubt that the document was genuine, they pulled him aside all the same in order to clarify the situation. They took him into a small room and asked to see other forms of identification, which he was only too happy to provide, and sure enough, they established that he was, indeed, a citizen of a country named Taured. He also presented currency, banknotes issued by his homeland, which did not look in any way counterfeit. Based on these findings, they then placed a map of the world on the table in front of him, and asked him to pinpoint the exact location of his country. He proceeded with a smug expression on his face, but as it transpired, it would now be his turn to be confused. He pointed to an area right on the border between France and Spain, where the modern-day Principality of Andorra is, saying that this is where his homeland should have been. He declared that the Kingdom of Taured was nearly 1,000 years old, so there was no way it could not have been on a standard world map. He also claimed that this was his third trip to Japan that year, that he had been making similar trips over the past 5 years and had never encountered a problem before. The travel stamps in his passport certainly seemed to corroborate this. Nevertheless, when airport officials decided to drill down into the finer details of his story, they discovered that the company he claimed to be visiting had never heard of him. The company he claimed to work for did not exist, and the hotel he was supposed to be staying at had no reservations under his name. His confusion quickly turned to anger, accusing the staff of pulling a practical joke at his expense. Unsurprisingly, he demanded to see government officials at once so that they could clear the matter up. As it turned out, he would be in for a long wait, and since they couldn't detain him in the customs room indefinitely, he was granted a suite on one of the top floors of the airport's hotel. His room was guarded by 2 immigration officers who were under strict orders not to allow him to leave. He was served a meal and was said to have taken a nap, but when government officials arrived later that evening and knocked on his door, there was no response. Upon entering the room, they found that he was nowhere to be seen. The man from Taured, along with all of his belongings, had simply vanished. The immigration officers on guard duty were firmly rebuked, although they maintained that they had been watching the room all day, and that no one had been in or out except for room service. The only other exit was through a ledgeless window 6 stories above the road below. A fall from such a height would have surely killed anyone trying to escape this way. Whilst authorities were left baffled by this strange event, no one has ever seen or heard from this man again, leaving the rest of us to question what happened to him.
Truly a bizarre story. Now, is it to be theorized that this man lived at a place called Taured, maybe from another time? That he entered into our reality, which was current day 1954, and was from a place long since forgotten? Or did he just simply escape the room somehow? I like to think, for the mystery purposes, that it is the former. Hope everyone's enjoying the show so far. My name is Dr. Crocko. We bring these to you every week. We are on episode number 16. I want to say 16. Portals and Other Dimensions. We do a weekly vote, 3 topics every week. We do it on pollmaker.com, so everyone has a chance to vote. Everyone's voice is heard, very democratic. Then the doctor makes the final call, gives the diagnosis, and tells you guys what the topic will be. And then I do the research. I put the video together. Sometimes we go live. Sometimes we do it in premiere mode, but it's always an interactive experience. It'll never just be a video put up. There will always be a chat here for everybody to meet every week. Put down your problems and watch mysterious, spooky, creepy, fantastical, conspiratorial, even nonsensical stuff, just to have fun. Let's not pick apart every episode for the scientific or the political or any kind of debate you want to have. This is merely for fun and why it's on its own channel, separate from all my other work. Now, there has been more and more weight given to the idea that there are other realities and dimensions besides our own, which bump against us and even overlap us. With this idea comes hand in hand the notion that traveling between them could also be possible. There are also accounts that point to the possibility that not only this is possible, but that such portals between these realms have already been opened. Intriguing, often a bit scary, and always weird. These cases of alleged gateways capture the imagination and make us wonder whether alternate realities not only exist, but have already been visited by us. Now, perhaps one of the most well-known tales of the supposed interdimensional portal concerns the town of Ong's Hat, O-N-G, Ong's Hat, merely a speck on the map and one of the numerous abandoned old villages scattered throughout the remote Pine Barrens of the U.S. state of New Jersey, purportedly getting the name from a man named Ong. Makes sense. Who once threw up his fancy silk hat in frustration when the jealous lover of a woman he was having an affair with stomped on it, after which it became stuck on a pine branch. The town supposedly started as a single hut. By the 1860s, the village had apparently grown into quite a lively town known for bootlegging and supplying booze to the outlying areas. However, the town declined dramatically in the following years, and by the 1930s was all but abandoned. Although it still showed up on maps and in modern days, it is merely feral, weed-choked ruins, crumbling buildings, and empty lots. The small rural town would perhaps forever remain an obscure backwater ghost town, if not for the curious book called Ong's Hat, The Beginning, which was written by Joseph Matheny and published in 2002. The book claims that in 1978, a man by the name of Wally Fard settled in New Jersey Pine Barrens after purchasing 200 acres there. Fard, who was a member of the secretive cult of the Moorish Orthodox Church of America, had allegedly just returned from traveling the world studying various philosophies, magical practices, and spiritualist techniques in such exotic locales as India, Persia, and Afghanistan. And he would then join another cult called the Moorish Science Ashram. He was apparently an eccentric man, to say the least, moving onto the property with a ragtag group composed of some runaway boys and 2 lesbian anarchists. Sounds like a modern-day SJW group. As a modern-day protest. Get some images up here. The old Red Tavern, an abandoned building in Ong's Hat. Now, once relocating to New Jersey, the book claims that Fard went about spreading the teachings of his sect and managing to draw about him quite a number of followers. Among this motley group of misfits, cultists, and general oddballs were 2 scientists by the names of Frank and Althea Dobbs, who were brother and sister and had their own bizarre history as they had been apparently raised within the UFO-worshipping commune run by their father in Texas. The 2 had been doing research at Princeton on something they referred to as cognitive chaos, which is quite complex but basically entailed utilizing untapped parts of the brain to unlock vast human potential in the form of wide variety of powers such as ESP, telepathy, curing diseases, conscious control of autonomic functions, and even halting the aging process. But they had earned the ire of their peers for their far-out fringe theories, and been kicked out of what the university called seditious nonsense. That's the reason was given. It seems that the two siblings had never been really accepted into the mainstream of academia, but with Fard they found themselves among outcast kindred spirits willing to listen to them. Now, as soon as they migrated to the remote Pine Barrens, Frank and Althea supposedly immediately went about creating a makeshift lab in an abandoned barn, from which they could continue their work unfettered by harsh criticism they had been subjected to before at the university. So intrigued with their work was Fard and his cult that they subsequently established the Institute of Chaos Studies, based on this theory. And this enabled the two scientists to have the funding and equipment that they needed to make progress, the likes of which they had never seen before, as well as attracting two more local fringe scientists named Harold Acton and Martine Kellenack. They brought these two on to help them in their research. Among their many bizarre experiments were using various psychedelic drugs in an attempt to unlock mind powers, monitoring brain activity and using electrical stimulation to try and manipulate the brainwaves to produce the abilities they were convinced were lurking untapped within the mind. Now, these experiments used an array of odd machines and devices, all slapped together and unorthodox to say the least. Among these was a device called the Egg, which was supposedly more or less a modified sensory deprivation chamber hooked up to computers and with various electrodes attached to a human subject to measure physiological responses, as well as a helmet equipped with brainwave manipulators. Apparently, there were several versions of the machine built, which showed some promise in allegedly providing better control of autonomous body functions and bestowing various other powers such as inner heat, enhanced healing, and remission of sickness. However, it wasn't until the fourth iteration of the device that things allegedly got truly bizarre. I can show you a little image of the Pine Barrens outside of Ong's Hat. Now, by the third generation of the Egg, they had already been experimenting with trying to descend consciousness down to the quantum level, which they believed would enable actual travel to parallel dimensions. But they had not been successful. With the fourth generation machine, they further refined the process and tested it on one of the runaways. They nicknamed him Kit. During the test, the machine purportedly completely vanished before everyone's eyes, only to reappear 7 minutes later with a startled but excited Kit, who claimed that he had been briefly transported to another dimension. The scientists were astounded by this and called the portal they had apparently opened the Gate. They reportedly made several more successful jumps to this alternate reality, which described was as having an abundance of plant life and water, but no humans. To add to all this weirdness, Ong's Hat was supposedly eventually threatened with a leak of dangerous nuclear material from nearby Fort Dix. In response, the residents began to use the Gate to flee to the parallel dimension, where they intended to stay and reestablish their town. Now, according to the tale, the government found out about the experiments and the capabilities of the machine, which prompted them to storm the compound in a raid that killed several people there who were in the process of jumping over. The writer of the accounts, Joseph Matheny, apparently claimed to have found documents outlining these events and even interviewed one of the scientists involved with the creation of the Gate, which he had been posting online and later made into his book. But there have never been any corroboration that these alleged documents ever existed at all. Making matters further muddied is that Matheny has been rather vague on whether any of this was intended as fact, fiction, or a fusion of both. Well, some things are better left just as a mystery. Sometimes we don't need the answer to every single thing. Yet, they always want you to jump to the last place in the book. Sometimes we're just here to enjoy the story, guys. like I said, this is not a breakdown of everything that's real or fake or trying to debunk things. We're just having fun. Think of it as a coast to coast, a new kind of either audio or visual podcast that's just about the bizarre, just about the spooky. We can do the fact-based and the research-based stuff over on the other channels. For now, let's just have a little fun. This is a good time to let your mind go. Just chill out and relax. Take 2 of these, call me in the morning. Now, other portals that are very famous and you hear talked about a lot are mysterious portals to hell. And this is since the dawn of mankind and its numerous religions. There have been many that feature some form of hell or the underworld, typically portrayed as a place of eternal punishment, torment, suffering, and despair. But depending on the culture and the religion, can also be an intermediary period between incarnations or simply a dreary land of the dead. The various versions of hell can be another dimension or plane of existence or an actual place in our physical reality, located deep in the bowels of the earth. Now, while there is much debate on whether any of the many incarnations of hell is a literal place, there have always been persistent stories that it not only exists in some form, but that it can also be accessed from the land of the living via tunnels, gateways, doorways, or even portals. Now we're going to look at the various mysterious locations around the world, despite being plain creepy, are said to be actual entrances to hell itself. Now, one of the more well-known such portals to hell is located exactly where one might expect to find one, if they exist at all. A spooky-looking bleak cemetery tucked away in the rural area of the U.S. state of Kansas, lies a sinister patch of land called Stall Cemetery. Its eerie, quiet atmosphere and rural setting have perhaps understandably bred many dark legends and stories, and the intense paranormal activity and hauntings associated with it has earned it the nickname America's Most Evil Graveyard. Here is a place also long associated with satanic cults, witchcraft, and shadowy figures carrying out bizarre rituals and human sacrifice by moonlight. And it supposedly has a doorway to hell. Let me give you an image of Stall Cemetery. I'd like to give you guys a visual aid so you guys can really picture it, get the imagination going. Now, these can be just listened to as an audio podcast, but I would highly suggest you take the visuals in. I'm on camera. We got the clips that we play, plus pictures. I just try to make it as interactive as possible. But if you're only someone that listens, I think you will enjoy it as well. That's why we got the music. The audio team stepping it up. Now, sitting at the black heart of this supposedly evil place is a decrepit, long-abandoned church, which may have once been an elegant cemetery, but is now mostly a feral, skeletal shell and collapsed piles of weed-choked rubble. Now, while it may not look, doesn't look like much now, this church has for over a century been said to be an actual portal to hell. The local legend apparently originates in 1850, when Lucifer himself is said to have used the church to emerge into the cemetery from hell and summon up the restless spirits clinging to it. From that point on, the devil supposedly began to pass through the gate twice a year, once at midnight on the spring equinox, and once on Halloween. These are times that the veil is thinner between our realities. And over the years was said to have been even fathered a child with a witch living in the area. Just popping up and getting some. Must be nice. Now, this abomination is said to have been born with a wolf hair and to have been badly, hideously deformed. The horrific child soon died, and its alleged grave can be even seen today, right beside a twisted old tree that is said to have been a place where they hung suspected witches during those days. The church itself fell into disrepair long ago, and its roof collapsed in the 1920s. Yet it was widely claimed by witnesses to repel rain, and that despite not having a roof, the interior would remain completely dry even during intense downpours. Frightened locals eventually mostly tore the building down, but the old church was said to still be used by Satan and up until the late 1980s, hundreds of rowdy people would show up at midnight on the spring equinox or Halloween in hopes of getting a glimpse of something strange, causing so much damage in the process that in the years since, the cemetery has been off limits to the general public. Even so, there are still numerous sightings of strange things going on at the church, such as floating lights, fleeting, shadowy figures that vanish into thin air, and rings of flames that can be seen to spontaneously form from nowhere, with no discernible material they could be burning from. One of the most famous spooky stories surrounding Stall Cemetery is that when Pope John Paul II visited Colorado in 1983, he supposedly had his private plane take a completely different route so as to fly all the way around Stall Cemetery. Such was its repulsive evil. It is another eerie, although uncorroborated tale for an already eerie place. It's always can't corroborate it, eerie story. If the Pope himself chose to not fly over the area, what could possibly lurk there? All right, we're going to move on a little bit here, and I want to talk a little bit about the windows or the mirrors that are said to be portals. I'm sure you guys have heard of scrying mirrors. We all now walk around with one in our pocket at all times. A black mirror, the oculus, the occult. These scrying mirrors are said to have powers that can let evil into our world. Now, mirrors have had legends, lore, superstition, and myths tied to them for pretty much as long as they've been around. The ancient Romans believed that they reflected a person's soul and could bring great strife if they were misused. And indeed, many other cultures have various negative, supernatural qualities attached to mirrors, such as they can suck out one's soul, be portents of death, or offer a glimpse into some other dimension. In many cultures, mirrors are used for communication with spirits, and it is believed they serve as portals or doorways to the spirit world, or that they are some barrier between the world of the living and that of the dead. Though that veil that separates us is very thin, it is perhaps this widespread belief that has led to the phenomenon of haunted mirrors, so common around the world that there are various disparate cultures that follow the superstition of covering mirrors at certain times. We've heard the superstition, don't break a mirror. But in particular, after a death, in order to prevent whatever is on the other side from peeking in or coming through. Or even to stop a soul from becoming trapped within the mysterious mirror world. Mirrors are weird, and this is reflected in plenty of legends and lore. So let's get into a couple mirror stories. We know the show Black Mirror, scrying mirrors, don't break a mirror, cover the mirror, spread mud on the mirror. We've heard many stories of strange happenings around these. Now, there are instances throughout history of paranormal activity gravitating towards mirrors, which takes various forms. One of the most common types of experiences are figures, shadows, apparitions, and entities other than the person in the room appearing in the mirror or sometimes even passing through. There are many reports of this happening, such as in the case with one commenter named Destiny on the site Quora, who says she is a spiritual advisor and explains one of her cases. She says, "One of my cases, a young woman loved mirrors. She would go to yard sales, estate sales for unusual, antique mirrors. One day she found an old, beautiful mirror from ceiling to the floor. She needed it. She had a sensation something was trying to get her attention. Until she said, looking at the window, 'Show yourself to me and talk.' This was a bad no-no to say the least. Her family started arguing, getting sick, as well as her pets. things started moving or disappearing. At that point, she contacted me. When I went in and found out through psychometry, a form of tool technique to communicate with spirits, we found out that the person who owned it was very negative, a very vain person. When this person passed away, the mirror was sold to my client, and the negative energy and spirit this person was attached to attached itself to the mirror. When my client said what she said to the mirror, she released the energy and the spirit into her home. The spirit fed off the negative energy, becoming stronger, which allowed it to become a poltergeist. I had to do a cleansing on the whole family, the pets, the home, and most of all, trap the spirit within the mirror again through a technique. After the cleansing of the mirror, it was thrown away properly, so it couldn't be used ever again. Once that was done, the family, the pets, and the home was back to normal and healthy again. Now, in another account, we allegedly have what it seems to be some sort of shadow person or even a demon using the mirror as a portal. The witness was apparently in his bedroom one night, which features a full-length mirror, when he saw lurking within it a tall figure in a black clothing and a Quaker hat, which supposedly stepped right out into the real world. The being was wearing a long black cloak and a Quaker hat. He had glowing red eyes. He floated along the floor 3 inches above the ground. No feet could be seen, yet he was present in a total physical, three-dimensional form. The man whom I am talking about was fully awake. This was no dream. The being asked the man if he would like to join them. The being was meant to be the man's spirit guide for life. In return, the man would receive all the material things that he could ever wish for. We hear about this a lot in superstitions and myths. Someone comes along and they're going to grant you some wishes, or they'll give you every object, everything you could ever want. He wants to be a spirit guide. You can give him everything he ever wished for. Fame as a movie star, immense riches, the girl or wife of his dreams, everything that he had been programmed to desire. The being was not there to sell the man on the benefits. He was just stating what the deal was. The being with the Quaker hat used the mirror as a portal, an unseen vortex that connects two places through time and space, and even dimensions or other realities or timelines. And we hear many of these different stories. I had a witness claim to have suffered extremely vivid, morbidly terrifying nightmares, and this seems to have all come to a head when he realized just what the origin of his nightmares was, and from where they had been spewing forth. According to him, these nightmares had started when he had moved into a house with plenty of mirrors in the bedroom, and that besides glimpsing shadow shapes moving around within them, he believed they were unleashing something negative into his life. He said the nightmare started when he moved into the house with mirrors covering the closet in the master bedroom. The mirrors were an open portal to other dimensions. He said, I knew the feng shui that one should not have mirrors in the bedroom because it causes restless energy. I realize now that mirrors do more than just increase the energy in a room. They let in evil spirits. We were renting, and because the mirrors were on folding doors of the closet, I could not work out how to cover them, and did not realize at the time how important it was to do so. Then a year later, when we moved into another house, the one we were in at the time of the writing, I hoped the nightmares would stop. They did not. This time, while there were no mirrors in the bedroom, the people that designed the house did not put a door between the bedroom and the bathroom, just an open arch. Since we were renting, there wasn't much I thought I could do. Part of the large vanity mirror looked almost directly into the bedroom. I ignored it, the part of my mind that told me it was important to do something about it. Once I realized that the bathroom mirror was letting something in that was causing my nightmares, I had two choices. Cover up the mirror or put Bible verses on it, similar to the way Mazuas protect doorways. And you hear constant stories over and over of just how mirrors are used to bring in the occult. Mirrors are used in the occult, and how they are able to let spirits in. And you'll hear mirrors, speech is the mirror of the soul. mirrors go back to the old world of scrying and magic. They were also seen as portals to other worlds. It is also said that mirrors are windows to parallel universes. Universes or verses? Verses. The word scrying usually means to foretell the future using a crystal ball or other reflective objects or surfaces. Scrying is an ancient art of divination, and its purpose is to receive information through our psychic abilities by opening our inner eye or using our abilities to receive visions, messages, and information from spirit or spirit realms. Sometimes we receive messages in words, stories, pictures. Some of us experience movie-like scenes to answers to our questions. Depending on how experienced a seer, a medium, or reader you are, definitely helps with what kind of information you can receive. Over the years, if you continue to practice scrying, you'll start to build a strong connections with the spirit world. But more so, you will build your confidence as a reader. So this encourages people. If you're going to be doing this, you're going all in. It brings you closer to the universe, raises your vibrational energy, but it can also bring in the darkness, bring in the evil to your life. And you'd be surprised, scrying is still very much used in today's society. Like I said, we're all walking around with one. Even mirror, mirror on the wall, which I guess we can get into in a little bit. Not actually said in the movie. Do you remember it in the movie? Where we generated a new reality where that term doesn't exist now? Or did we all just misremember? Now, like I said, the practice of scrying dates as far back as 3000 BC in China, where cracked eggs were used as a form of scrying and divination. From the oracles of the Delphi to the cradle of mankind in Africa, it's so well documented and such common practice that even the buttoned-up Victorians of the beautiful bygone era had their method even before the spiritualist movement. It was said that if a young Victorian girl took a mirror and looked behind her into another mirror, she'd see the face of her future husband. So make sure you look in that mirror before bed tonight. Make sure there's no shadows around. Now we're going to talk about glitches in our reality, and yes, we are even going to touch on the Mandela effect. But let's start with a clip from the channel Strange But True Mysteries. Very good channel. Highly suggest you guys go check him out. He's got multiple glitch in the Matrix stories, and we're just going to start with a few. I think it's a total of 3 stories. I think you guys will enjoy them all. And then we're going to move to a channel called Beyond Creepy. Again, another friend of the channel. Great channel. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy these. Give me a second. I'm pulling them up. Oh, we really are going to do the Mandela effect, aren't we? Going to have to. All right. So we're going to start with glitches, paranormal stories coming from the channel Beyond Creepy. Again, I'm crediting them on camera, but I'm also going to be adding them to the pinned comment by tomorrow morning. So if you're watching this tomorrow, in the future, maybe in the past, maybe through a scrying mirror, you will be able to link those channels, contact them, talk to them, leave comments, and just have another outlet for these truly bizarre and mysterious story.
Across the world, people have been reporting weird slips or glitches in reality. People are jolted forward or backward in time, or to another place altogether. Some people even describe encountering themselves, sometimes older and sometimes younger. Just such a case happened to a fellow named Brandon Thompson in Northern California. I was driving up to Yuba Sutter one day. There, in the middle of country nowhere, is one of those 4-way stoplights that makes you wonder why the heck they put it there. Anyway, after the stop, as I was heading northbound, my attention focused on a Ford Galaxy that had stopped in the opposite direction. Both of us slowly accelerated from the stop. As I looked at the car, I recognized one, my uncle in the passenger seat, my aunt with her flaming red hair, and lastly, though, I didn't get to see very long, me in the back seat of this galaxy. I pulled over on the other side of the intersection, got out, and looked at the car disappearing into the distance. Not like poof, but normal-like. I just saw myself, aunt, and my uncle 30 years ago. I had a mind to go after it, but something told me not to. A gut feeling. Seeing that was a treat in itself. I was blown away and still am. Looking back at that one experience, one thing that was not normal was the interior of the car was dark, hard to explain. While it's entirely possible the witness encountered 3 very similar looking people in a similar car as to the one they drove in 30 years earlier, and that caused him to think he was seeing into the past. However, there are numerous such cases that exist that cause me to wonder if Brandon actually saw what he believes he saw. In my video, Arrival Apparitions, I discussed a case in which a man claims he encountered himself at a gas station. Interestingly, also in that case, the witness felt uneasy about actually attempting to interact with himself, unsure of what would happen. In Northern Ireland, a man named Richard had an equally bizarre encounter, one that spilled out into the street and into pure strangeness as he soon realized the man he was chasing was himself. This account appeared on a July 24, 2015 episode of Midnight in the Desert. Back in the 80s, mid-70s, I was earning more money than I probably should have for a person my age. So I was in the bar one night being the center of attraction, and I was at the bar buying everyone drinks, everyone in the bar. A guy popped me in the back of the head and ran out the door. Well, my hackles got up, and I run after this guy, what I was going to do to him. And I run, and no matter how hard I run, I couldn't catch this guy. And at the very end of the block, 2 blocks up, he turned around and he looked at me, and this guy had white hair and black glasses. I was in my 20s. I had bright red hair, but there was a familiarity about this guy. But now I'm 57, and now I have pure white hair and black rimmed glasses. I don't know if it was my subconscious or a warning or something from the future warning me about my behavior. I knew there was a familiarity, but what threw me was the white hair and black glasses, because I never imagined myself having that look. But now I look at myself in the mirror and I know exactly who it was. I'm 57, the exact image of the person that I chased that night. Again, was it merely a coincidence, or had the man actually encountered an older version of himself? In 1987, a man named Joe was standing outside a gas station in Maplewood, Missouri, waiting for a friend when he had a fleeting glimpse of another time. All of a sudden, everything got quiet. No traffic noise, nothing. I could see everything around me had changed. The power lines, the gas station, then everything scrambled. Sound came back, everything was back to normal. I stood in the same spot 10 years later, and I saw in real time what I had seen 10 years before. In another instance, a couple parked outside a CVS store saw time repeat itself in an extraordinary way. My husband and I had parked outside a CVS and were crossing the road to go there. As we stepped onto the road, there was a bicyclist who was in front of us just outside the building. He passed by, left to right, about 10 feet away. No biggie, but by the time we reached the walkway, the same bicyclist was to our left, and he had slowed down to let us pass. I gestured to him to go ahead, and he did. There were no other people around, so in essence, there was a few seconds jump back in time, and the bicyclist crossed in front of us twice. I've discussed similar cases in my video Distorted Realities, in which people found themselves in another place, possibly a future or past setting, only to blink back into their present day. A trip to a local Home Depot in the summer of 2012 would forever change a man's life. In the summer of 2012, a simple trip to Home Depot changed the way I look at reality forever. I have been thinking about the details of that event ever since. A friend of mine and I decided to put up a tile backsplash in my kitchen one weekend. Saturday morning, at about 9 a.m., I went to Home Depot, 20 minutes away, to pick up a tile cutter for the job. When the witness returned home, he found his friend was very angry. When asked why, the friend informed him that he had been gone for over 8 hours. I said that's impossible, and that I had been gone maybe an hour. I explained because I was able to pick up the tile cutter almost instantly, hopped in my car, and left. Standing there in the kitchen, I looked at my watch, which was stopped at 9:43 a.m. The clock on the microwave said 5:17. I then looked at and showed him the store receipt to prove when I checked out it said 9:40 a.m. For the life of me, I can't account for the missing 7 or so hours. In 1997, Steve McGill had an eerie experience when he decided to follow his girlfriend back to her place. I was dating a girl at the time, and she and I were at my mom's house. I can't remember what we were doing there, but after a while, my girlfriend said she would go back up home in her own car, about 8 miles north from my mom's house, and I could follow her back when I was done at my mom's. I was going to stay and chat with my mom for a while, but I was tired and decided not to, so said goodbye to my mom and got into my own car. Now, it was no more than 30 seconds to a 1-minute gap between my girlfriend leaving and me leaving, so I expected to catch up to her on the motorway very quickly. There was only one way back home. However, as I traveled, I could not see her car. For some childish reason, I was only 21 at the time, I gained speed to close the gap, and soon found myself doing nearly 90 miles per hour in a bid to catch her. Mile after mile, my speed rose to over 110 miles per hour, but there was still no sign of her. I began to think she had taken a longer detour, or even popped into a shop or something, so I let off the gas a bit, back to nearer 80 miles per hour, as I knew she couldn't possibly still be in front of me, as she was quite a moderate driver and never broke the speed limit. How wrong I was. To my absolute shock and amazement, when I pulled up at her house, not for 1 minute expecting her to be there, her car was there. Not only that, but she had time to call into the local fish and chip shop for tea and was busy plating it up for us for our evening meal. I have since worked out that she would have had to have traveled at 200 miles per hour to get back in time for her to have done what she did. In 1971, Glyn Jones saw something bizarre in the skies of Clare and Suffolk. I was working as a chef in the village of Clare, Suffolk. Traveling one night between 11:30 p.m. and midnight on the back road from Cavendish to Foxearth, a very rural location, I became aware of a low droning sound. I stopped the car on a right-hand curve by a field, got out, and stood on the edge of the field. The night sky was filled with World War II bombers. I would guess I could see more than 30 flying, spaced out. I was not. In the same direction, and it was their prop engines producing the noise. I don't recall whether or not they showed any lights. During World War II, this part of eastern England was peppered with airfields from where the bombing raids against Germany were launched. I believe what I saw was maybe one of the 1,000 bomber raids forming, which would have taken place maybe 30 or so years prior to my sighting. It goes without saying that by the 1970s, there would only have been a handful of these planes still airworthy, and they would have been spread about around the world. The fear of ridicule has meant that I have kept this largely to myself, but the utter strangeness of it has never left me. I was neither under the influence of alcohol or drugs. I am pretty level-headed and have not had any other inexplicable sightings before or since. In another instance, a man recalls a time he inexplicably jolted forward in time or went to another place altogether. This account appeared on a December 21st, 2016 episode of Darkness Radio. This incident occurred in 2013. The witness recalled receiving a letter in the mail informing him that he had to be to court for jury duty. This included the date and the time. As he had already performed jury duty, he knew what to expect. The date was set for noon, It was on a Wednesday. The days passed and I had that date and time in the back of my head. I began preparing for it, telling my boss I needed the day off, etc. Tuesday night came around and I was prepared. Wednesday morning I was counting the minutes until I had to leave. 11:25 a.m. I had to leave at that time because it was a 20-minute ride to the courthouse. I should be there at about 11:45 to 11:50 a.m. 11:25 came around and I head out the door in my old Mustang. About halfway to the courthouse, the man attempted to call his wife, but for some reason, he could not get a signal. This would be the first of many strange things to come. About 20 minutes later, I got to the courthouse, where I had previously had jury duty and no one was there. It was eerily quiet, like if everyone had gone to lunch or something. I was shocked. Did I miss jury duty? I checked around, checked the time on my phone, and it said 12:50 p.m. I stood there staring at my phone in disbelief. How is it 12:50? I thought to myself. I was in shock. From there, the witness left the courthouse and went back to his car. He was surprised to see that the time on the radio's clock read 12:53 p.m. When he attempted to start his car, it wouldn't start. The car was completely dead. Turning the key in the ignition, it only clicked. Stepping out of his car, he popped the hood to have a look. Just then, a police officer pulled up next to him and offered to give him a hand getting his car started. I was still kind of stunned and said, yeah. So he said, I'll just come out and see what I can do. I just have to go punch in. It's almost 1 o'clock, right? I was shocked that the cop acknowledged that it was almost 1 p.m. I checked my phone again, and yes, it's almost 1. So he goes into the station to punch in, and I keep fiddling with my car for a while. As he's heading back out, when I go to start my car, the engine roars to life. He waves at me, noting my car had started, and I leave. Halfway home, I call my wife, and the call actually goes through. I tell her about the bizarre series of events I just went through, and I ask her, what time is it? She says, it's 12:20, hun. I check my phone, and yes, indeed, it was 12:20 noon. I look over at the time on the radio, and it's 12:20. I don't have any explanation how I went 1 hour into the future, then returned to my timeline. If the cop hadn't confirmed the time, I would have just blamed a faulty phone. The world is a strange place.
Strange but true stories. Tales from the light side, the dark side, and the other side. I'm Steve White. You know, we are so blessed to have such wonderful fans of this channel who send us their strange but true stories. We love reading them, and we get an understanding that the world is truly wild and a magical place, and the stories run the gamut of topics. Now, the following two stories are not the wildest we've ever heard, but they speak to a mystery and wonder of the world around us. A world that goes from humdrum and regimented to, holy guacamole, what just happened? Did that thing really take place? Did anybody else see what I just saw? Or didn't see? So, no alien abductions this time around, or anything off the reservation, really. But these stories do make you wonder about some of the mysteries here on Earth that happen to us humans. So, this is my latest strange story I can tell after a lifetime of strange stories. And this happened about a year ago. Sometimes I drive Lyft. It's a nice way to get out of the house, and sometimes the money isn't bad. One night I picked up a lady at her place of employment in a part of Seattle called Queen Anne. I was to take her east to a different part of town called Capitol Hill, and then down a long road towards Lake Washington. Okay, so no problem so far, right? I pull over at the designated address. I picked her up. I gave her the usual short but polite greeting, set the app, and off we went. I would say it had been perhaps 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and like I said, it was a year ago, late fall, early winter. About halfway to our destination, She asked if I would pull over to a gas station / convenience store. Yeah, no problem, I said, and I turned left into the establishment. I parked off to the side. I left the motor running. So she got out, walked into the market, and maybe about a minute or two later, she came out. Well, she then turns to her left to where I'm parked. She walks straight to the car, and then this is where things got strange. She stopped directly in front of my car, and of course I'm sitting there in the driver's seat. I'm looking right at her as she's staring directly at me. But she's got this strange look on her face. I don't know, like she's got a sudden storm of stress and anxiety that just hit her. Now, again, mind you, I see her looking directly at me. And then she does this abrupt about face, and she walks off, and she circles the entire gas station area. And after about 45 seconds, a minute, she makes a rough path right back to me. Now, I'm watching this whole time, and I'm thinking, what the heck is she doing? Well, she ends up right back where she started, but this time there's this look of relief on her face. And she walks over to the back passenger door. She gets in, and she says, something odd. She said, "Where did you go? Where were you? You disappeared. I thought you left me here." I turned around. I looked right at her, and I said, "I didn't go anywhere. I don't ever leave a passenger stranded anytime, no matter what. I was right here the whole time. I was staring right at you. I promise you that." Her eyes got wide, and she lifted her bottle of water to her mouth. Her hand was visibly shaking when she took the drink. She set the bottle down. She said, "I walked out of that store, and there was nobody here. There was not a car in this parking spot." So, again, according to her, the spot where I had parked was empty. Nothing. I was gone. Now, people might wonder if she was drunk or stoned, maybe hallucinating or something. But I don't think so. One, she didn't have that vibe. And two, I could kind of tell if people have had a little bit too much to drink or have been, doing some things at home before I pick them up. But, I had picked her up from her place of employment too. So, unless she's doing something weird while she's working, I just didn't get that vibe that she had been drinking or had done anything to mess with her mental abilities. So, I know that's not a guarantee of her sobriety, but you just got to trust me on this. I really don't think she was in any way affected by drink or drugs. So then, for good measure, we're just pulling out. And I asked her again, what had happened? Just tell me the story from the beginning. And I tried to keep it light, of course, because, I don't think it's really good form to grill a paying customer about anything, under any circumstances. But again, she gave me the same reply. She said, "I walked out of the store. I looked right in this parking space where you had parked, and there was nobody there. You were gone. That stall was empty. I thought you'd left me, and it freaked me out. And then, I walk around, and I come back, and you're there." And I said, "I saw you come out of the store. You looked right at me. Then you walked around the parking lot and the gas station. You came right back to me. And I was there. I never left. I swore up and down that I had never left." Well, what can you say after that? There's really nothing. I know I didn't leave the spot. And she was convinced that I had disappeared. So what can you conclude on that? I don't know. I'm still wondering myself.
Okay, guys, a couple glitch in the Matrix stories. I hope you guys enjoyed those. It's going to be time to move on to the next topic, though, and where we're going with this sometimes upsets people. A triggering occurs sometimes with this that I just cannot explain. Now, what we are going to talk about here is known as the Mandela effect. It's got many different names: a false memory, the Mandela effect. Some people call it a shared psychosis. We've heard of folie à deux. Well, that can be multiplied to the nth degree. Well, let's just talk about the Mandela effect, referring to a situation in which large masses of people believe that an event occurred when it did not. Looking at the origin of the Mandela effect, some famous examples as well as some potential explanations for this strange confluence of perceptions can help to shed light on this unique phenomenon. Now, the name, quote, Mandela effect, began when it was first coined in 2009 by Fiona Broome, when she published a website detailing her observance of the phenomenon. Broome was at a conference talking with other people about how she remembered the tragedy of former South African President Nelson Mandela's death in a South African prison in the 1980s. In fact, Nelson Mandela did not die in the 1980s in a prison. He passed away in 2013. As she began to talk to other people about her memories, she learned she was not alone. Other people remembered seeing the news coverage of his death as well as a speech by his widow. Broome was shocked that such a large mass of people could remember the same identical event in such detail when it supposedly never happened. Encouraged by a publisher, she began a website to discuss what she called the Mandela effect.
Wrong. Okay, that's not that was done later. People confuse that. The one where Lisa says when she's President Trump ruined the economy or whatever, this is 15 years ago. This is the predictive programming or the retrocausality. The other one down the escalator is not. There's no let me warn the triggered. there's hundreds of people that were enjoying this, then now they're just like getting up from their chair and trying to throwing tomatoes at the screen. The Mandela effect is part of the strange environment section, but for the triggered, I'll be quick. Okay? So if you're Mandela affected, it all goes along with all this stuff. There's no difference. It's just one more thing to add to all this strangeness. And it's like, if you don't have this element, you have all this strangeness. If you don't have this element, it's okay. Not everybody sees it. But just one last time, try to prove it or get the triggered to understand. This is somebody that spent all day or weeks doing a beautiful pencil sketch of their favorite movie. This is Louis in Interview with the Vampire. But the person that sketched it in 2010, see this before the Mandela effect hit hard, they write Interview with a Vampire. So it's their favorite movie, and they spent all day sketching it, but they can't get the name right. There's these things are called, guys, residuals. And people that study the Mandela effect, there's not like 15 of these things. There are thousands and thousands at this point. And the crazies that are affected by the Mandela effect, like your narrator, all remember the same things in the same way. We don't remember it being called, we remember Interview with a Vampire. It's called Interview with the Vampire. We don't remember it being called Those Damn Vampires, or Cloudy with a Chance of Vampires, like Meatballs. We don't remember it all over the place. Star Wars Vampires. We remember it the same way. That's what gives itself away. Although the triggered are very triggered by this, and I'll try to move through this very quickly. This was my favorite, and I couldn't believe it, so I ordered this. This was released, I think, mostly in Europe. I ordered the box. It came. Franco Columbo, the star of this movie. They got the name wrong on the DVD box. Not once or twice or for a day they ran these things off and they got the name wrong, and then of course they corrected it, Matt. No. The DVD box, the Blu-ray box for Bread Island, Columbo, has the star's name wrong in every single box. I have one. It's not possible, guys. Now why this residual made it out the other side intact, we don't know. Okay? And this is a major one with me. And a lot of people that followed Mr. Olympias and stuff, his name's Franco Columbo. His name today is Franco Columbu. A friend of mine took this. This C-3PO's right bottom leg is all silver. But the Disney exhibition in Orlando or in Epcot, one of the two, at Disney or in Epcot, has all gold leg. Disney got it wrong when they had already owned Star Wars. How do you, I mean, I don't know how people explain that away. I really don't. Calling everybody that's Mandela affected crazy. That we remember 2 gold legs as legs silver. But Disney got it wrong? Yeah, the guys that put this exhibit together, they're drinking coffee, they worked on it all day. There's a problem here, George. What's the problem? Well, C-3PO's bottom right leg in all the movies is silver. Pure silver. Well, don't we have to nah, fuck it. They're not, nobody will notice. I mean, at the Disney exhibit, they just got it wrong and nobody cared to correct it. Disney working with Hallmark. Disney, joint venture with Hallmark, presents a line that's not in the movie. Mirror, mirror on the wall. On the keepsake. It was never in the movie. It's not possible. Okay? It's not... Well, Matt, it must have been in the book. The book it came after the movie. The Snow White book came after the movie. Was monumentally impactful in the late 30s. There is no mirror, mirror on the wall in the movie. This is a residual. There's no way to explain it away. Oops! My bad. There's like 400 people spent weeks painting a lion laying with a lamb, but that never happened. And in many of the memes, they put the wolf, they put the wolf shall lie with the lamb. They quote Isaiah, but they have the wrong animal in their painting. That's just, it's a mistake that could happen to anybody. Okay, enough of that. I mean, the triggered. We're so close to walking out on this presentation for the.
Like all beginnings, it started with an end to a life, a global phenomenon born in the wake of one man's death. On a warm South African summer evening in 2013, a family stood grieving around a home hospital bed, looking down upon the body of a man who had just breathed his last breath. He had been a great man, a revered man, adored and respected throughout the civilized world. The date was the 5th of December, and the body belonged to none other than Nelson Mandela. The next day, as news of his passing was being broadcast around the globe, an entire nation found itself in the depths of mourning. But elsewhere in the world, a palpable feeling of surprise was brewing over these reports. Mandela's death had not been unexpected. He was in his 95th year and had been ill for some time. But the news of his death still came as quite a shock to many people, because as far as they were concerned, he had already been dead for almost 30 years, apparently having passed away sometime in the mid-1980s whilst he had been in prison. As the days and weeks passed by, more and more people expressed this same feeling of surprise, not just in their hundreds, but in their thousands. The world suddenly found itself polarized between those who believed Mandela had died in December 2013, as reported, and those who remembered him dying many decades earlier. It wasn't the first time such an inconsistency in the details of a historical event had been noticed, but it was by far the most prominent example to date. Before Mandela's death, there had been no name for this alleged phenomenon. But due to the high profile and widespread nature of this one event, people began referring to any disagreements over how things are remembered and the subsequent feelings of confusion as the Mandela effect. And so the phenomenon was born. And the truly strange thing is, there has been no shortage of other apparent anomalies in our timelines. Shortly after the phenomenon had made itself known and had been christened in honor of the great man himself, many other examples began to surface. For instance, there are a whole host of people who absolutely believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster did not occur in 1986, but 3 years earlier, in 1983. that Tank Man, the youngster who stood up to the column of armoured vehicles in Tiananmen Square in 1989, was actually run over and killed by the lead tank, not spirited away by the police as was seen on film, and that Mother Teresa had already been canonized as a saint before her death in 1997, as opposed to September 2016. No saint has ever been canonized while still alive, and many people remember rather vividly the resulting controversy surrounding this almost sacrilegious breaking of convention. These apparent anomalies are not just limited to major events, they also occur in much more subtle ways. In fact, one of the most famous examples of the Mandela effect is that of the alleged misspelling of the Berenstain Bears, a much-loved series of children's books which originated in America during the 1960s. Many long-time fans of the series were confused, and some even outraged, to find that the titles of these books had changed from Berenstein to Berenstain, spelled with an A instead of an E, which is not how they remembered or even pronounced the name growing up.
And I know it's a weird one. I know it's one that people get a little afraid of, but we're just talking about portals, alternate realities, other dimensions. This fits right in. Now a couple more famous ones and we'll move on. Hello, Clarice from Hannibal Lecter. Current Hannibal does not say hello, Clarice. Today all he says is morning. So where did all these references come from? Queen, we are the champions. And us, it's we are the champions of the world. I will not sing on any other channel. Many people remember the ending of the famous Queen song, we are the champions of the world. Current does not end with the world, just ends. Is it Looney Tunes or Looney Tunes? Toons? Tunes? I remember Toons. They're telling me it's Tunes. Again, these are slight things, but multiple people remember them in a different way. I think I have one more video on 5 true Mandela effect glitch in our reality stories, and it's from the faithful, strange but true stories. Let's get right into this. I got this clip, and then I think I have a final story to leave us off with after this. It's either 2 or 3 stories, or 1 or 2 stories left after this one. This is 5 stories in one, so we're packing a lot in here. So we're going to play this clip, then I'll come back on with one final story about stepping into an alternate reality. It's going to be a real fun narration for me. I'm going to bring in some other sound effects. I think I'm going to try a little something. But let's enjoy these 5 true Mandela effect glitch in our reality stories from the channel Strange for True Stories with your host, Steve White.
Have you ever had an instance in your life where something completely freaky and unexplainable happened? Here are 5 stories in which the people involved are still scratching their heads as how what happened to them actually happened. 1. How did he move that fast? Back in 2003, while stationed in Portsmouth, Virginia, I was going through a divorce and as such had moved back into the barracks. Reeling from the stress of the divorce, I had trouble sleeping and would go for a run at all hours. One morning, around 4 a.m., I took off for a quick run. Portsmouth has some pretty dodgy areas, and my run took me straight through one of them. As I got to the top of a bridge, I saw someone standing on the other side of the road. It was odd, but not completely unheard of, that I would see a non-runner standing somewhere other than a bus stop. But even though it wasn't unheard of, I still took notice of him. Have you ever been in a situation where you are just hyper aware of what somebody is wearing? You have that crazy thought in your head that you may have to describe that person later? Well, that's what I was doing. I took a mental snapshot for sure. Well, he also watched me the entire time I was approaching, and as I got closer, he turned his back to me, but continued to watch me over his shoulder. Since I tend to become more friendly in awkward situations, I said hi as I ran past him, but I picked up my pace just a bit. He didn't look like he was out for an early morning run in the least. Once past him, I started to feel comfortable again, and like I wasn't in any sort of danger. I continued my run, relaxing back into the rhythm of the pavement and my pace. There was an overpass over the interstate that I usually sprinted over to really get my heart pumping. On the other side, as I slowed back down a little, I saw the same guy I had seen earlier standing on the side of the road. This was a straight line from when I had passed before. I hadn't turned back around or started my run back to the base. No cars had passed me, and there was no way he could have gotten from where we first met to here in that amount of time without him driving past me. Again, being nervous, all I could say was, "Man, you're fast." He didn't say anything, but did the same turn the back, look over his shoulder thing as he had before. I kept looking behind me to see if he was chasing, and I also kept my eyes peeled forward to make sure he didn't get in front of me again. However, I did nearly sprint back to the barracks from that point, and without a doubt set a new personal speed record. I have never been so freaked out. 2. Did I attract him with my thoughts? I had a friend in high school whose name was Bob. Bob was a very nice guy, and while we weren't that close, we had similar tastes in music, and we shared CDs. This is in the late 90s, well before file sharing. Anyway, we eventually graduated, and I moved several hundred miles away to college, and we lost touch. When I left for college, I had one of Bob's CDs still in my possession. It was Beat by King Crimson. I listened to it lots of times, really good stuff. I simply love Adrian Belew on that album, and loved the cover of Heartbeat on his Young Lions solo album later on. Now, anyway, I'm getting away from the story. Fast forward 10 years. I'd graduated college and was knee-deep in my career, and finally saved up enough money and bought my first house. In the new house, unpacking, I see the CD in a box. Hadn't noticed it in many years, and thought, gee, I really should track down Bob and return this. A moment later, the doorbell rings. I answer it, and I kid you not, it's Bob. And after exchanging some hellos and how you doing lines, he says, "Hey, you wouldn't happen to still have that King Crimson CD, would you?" I look down, and I'm holding it in my hand. I'm dumbfounded. I stutter and stammer about how I hadn't listened to it in years, and happened to just open the box full of CDs, and there it was. He can't fathom it, and I sure as heck can't understand how something I haven't thought about in a decade, in a room with a guy I haven't seen in a little more than that, is in my hands at this precise moment. I hand it to him, and we talk a little while longer. We promise to keep in touch, and then he leaves. I haven't seen Bob since. To this day, I am still completely baffled. 3. The Quantum Cigarette. I was leaving work with a coworker who was going to give me a ride home. I'm a smoker, and he is not, so he definitely didn't want me smoking in his car. I asked if he wanted me to throw it away, and he said, "Nah, go ahead, finish it up." So I planned to do just that. As we stood, I was leaning against his driver's side door, and he was a few feet in front of me. We were having a conversation about work stuff, and while that was happening, I was puffing away on my cigarette. I kept getting this feeling that I should just throw my cigarette to the ground so we could just get going. Basically, he's giving me a ride home, and I'm inconveniencing him by smoking. So each puff I took made me think of it a little stronger. One of the drags, I had a complete vision of just throwing the cigarette to the ground, but I instead held on to it and dropped my arm after the puff. He said, "Okay, let's go," thinking that I had dropped the cigarette and was finished. I said, "What are you talking about? I still have to finish." And I held up my cigarette for him to see. His eyes got very wide, and he shakily pointed to the ground and asked, "What's that then?" I looked at the ground, and sure enough, there was a cigarette, still lit, laying on the ground. I exclaimed, "You gotta be kidding me." And then I took my own cigarette from my hand and placed it next to the cigarette on the ground. It was an identical length and an identical cherry. He said, "I watched you throw that one to the ground." We both puzzled over it for a while, and eventually we didn't discuss it any longer. The thing is, if anyone were to be smoking and throw their butt, it probably wouldn't be half finished. Also, it probably wouldn't have been so close to the driver's side door and instead in the middle of the parking lot or something. Furthermore, we were there for many minutes, and it should have either burned out by then or at least had an inconsistent ash line. Regardless of all that, to this day, I believe that if I were to have bagged that cigarette CSI style, it would have matched my DNA.
Okay, guys, we're coming up on the conclusion of the show, but I have one more story for you guys. I hope everybody enjoyed this week's installation of Spooky Sunday. We're already on episode number 16. I know it's crazy. I can't believe that we've gotten this far. It's been consistent. We haven't missed a week. We've done every week, every Sunday for 16 weeks in a row. So I got to thank you guys for supporting it and coming out to watch it. Now, if you're new here, you're going to say, "You've been on for 16 weeks, the views are kind of low." We were doing it on another channel, which it was doing very well. Everybody can attest. We were getting, over 1,000 views per episode, maybe more. Some hit 2,000 views. And I chose to put it and start it on a new channel so it can be its own thing and blossom on its own merits, not the buildup of a channel that I already had established. I wanted to see if this thing can make it on its own. So I appreciate everybody that came out and supported that. If anybody can go the extra mile and wants to do donations to the show, to myself, and to the work I do, and the upgrades of the equipment and everything else that goes that's involved in going into the show, you can do so through PayPal. The link should be in the description if I did everything correct. Should be paypal.me/Davey Crocko. Leave a message. I will email you back. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so through that method. All right. One last story before bed, guys. Rain pounded McKenelly's car as she drove through San Bernardino, California, to spend a few days at a sheepdog trial in Paris, California. So this is a story of a woman named Carol Chase McKenelly. McKenelly. We'll go with that. Going with the haunted rain sound for this one. As she topped a hill south of the city, she saw a road sign for nearby Riverside. Her family roots were put down in Riverside in the early 1800s, and she wanted to visit familiar places, such as her old house and the cemetery where her grandparents are buried. She said, "I've been going to Riverside since I was a baby. I'm real familiar with the city. I know my way around. I knew where my grandmother lived. I've been to the cemetery. I knew where I was going." As McKenelly thought of visiting her grandparents' graves, a chill ran through her. "Just as I decided to visit a cemetery, a huge blast of cigar scent entered my car," she said. "It was pouring rain out, and I had my windows rolled up. My grandpa smoked cigars, and he died when I was 5, and that's all I remember about him. Just as quickly as the smell floated through the car, it was gone." She drove past Riverside and on to Paris, where she checked into a hotel and attended the dog show. The next day, McKinley attended the first sheepdog trial, then drove to Riverside. She didn't like what she saw. I could not find anything familiar, McKinley said. I used to live there after college. Her street wasn't the same, it was just wrong. The bungalows with small yards looked the same age as her old house, and the numbers were right, but her house wasn't there. I could not find my old place, she said. I thought they couldn't have torn down the house and built another house in that 1920 style to fit into the architecture. None of the houses looked familiar. They all looked different. Then she drove to the street where her grandmother once lived, stopped the car, and looked around in amazement. It was totally different, she said. None of the houses were anything like I remembered. No tall trees. Her house wasn't there. The numbers were in the same range, but the houses were all new. Grandma's house and my aunt and uncle's house next door were gone. All of the homes on what should have been her grandmother's street were modern ranch-style houses lined by bushes, nothing like her grandmother's big Tudor home with towering eucalyptus trees in the yard. It was just gone. So was the cemetery. The cemetery where my grandparents were buried was just not there, McKinley said. I drove around the block where it was supposed to be, and it was just fenced off with weeds inside. No grate, driveway, anything. Confused, McKinley pulled away from the empty lot to see if she could find anything familiar. She did. She recognized Riverside City College and Central Middle School. Some of the other stuff was right. The college looked right. The middle school looked right, she said. But when she pulled onto University Avenue, things were markedly different. University Avenue was a main drag, and there was scary-looking people, so I got out of there, she said. I looked for the Mission Inn, and it wasn't there. Now, University Avenue, once home to restaurants, insurance companies, banks, motels, was now completely ghetto, McKinley said. It was all graffitied up and deserted, to the point she was afraid to stop and ask directions. It was on University Ave she realized something otherworldly was happening to her. The thing that occurred to me is if I got out of my car, something weird would happen, McKinley said. I thought if I talked to someone, I'd be forever caught in this weird version of, quote, other Riverside, or that they weren't going to be human. The more places I tried to recognize, nothing matched up. Nothing looked familiar, she said. Now, after a couple agonizing, frustrating hours, McKinley turned the car around and went back to Paris. Everything was normal, she said. I was afraid I'd go back and the hotel wouldn't be there or my key wouldn't fit. Everything was as it should be, though. A few years later, McKinley's father died and was to be buried in the same cemetery as her grandparents. The cemetery she saw is an empty, fenced-off, weedy lot. It was back to what I remembered, she said. He was buried next to my grandparents. The rest of the city looked like it did when I lived there after college in the 70s. My cousin was there, and she said her house and my grandma's house are still there. University Avenue was back looking normal, and the Mission Inn was there. We had lunch there. I felt comfortable. I didn't go back to the other areas to check them, but I knew they would be okay. So what happened to Carol Chase McKinney? She convinced she slid into another dimension, one that was less friendly. She said, I just got the feeling that if I got out of my car and talked to someone, I was going to fall off the edge of the earth. I'd end up being missing, she said. It must have been a dimensional thing. It looked like it was 2006, but I'd taken a different path. It looked like Riverside had just taken a different direction, she said. And this story makes me think of Missing 411 when she said if I, stepped out of my car, I'd be missing. Well, that rings true for the Missing 411 cases. One of the theories is that these portals are opening up, and no one can really explain it. No one can explain what's happening to these people. Everyone's trying to come up with, is it an alien abduction? Is it a cryptid? Is it gangs? Is it a satanic, smiley face murder? Every different theory, everything under the sun. But as we know, there's nothing new under the sun. So what are taking these people? Now, we heard in the beginning, dimensions come in and out of our reality. These portals open up. One theory is that people are just stepping through and never being seen again. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I had a blast making this one. I'm really liking narrating a lot of these stories and finding the right clips that can go with my style and what I want to bring to you guys. It's never going to be, aggregated clips just in one big show and you're not going to see me. I don't think that's what I'm here for. There will be some shows where there's no clips and it's all me. Sorry. But I think a mix of the two have been the best. I mean, when I've got the best responses, that's what the shows have been. And I'm doing my best to just make it the most natural, most fun, and engaging show I possibly can. Now, I have all my other stuff, but this is once a week, Sundays, on the Dr. Crocko channel. So if you guys are new here, and thank you to my loyal subs, but if you're new here, just hit subscribe and look out for the notification next week. If you're a loyal sub here or you just subbed, I thank you very much. And if anybody would like to support the channel, you can do so through PayPal, and it's highly appreciated. With that said, we are going to get out of here. Now, with premieres, the chat goes away fairly quickly, so I will leave the music playing for about another 30 seconds to a minute so everybody can say their goodbyes, their good night, don't let the bed bugs bite, or whatever ending you would like to have. Now, guys, don't be scared. It's okay to turn the lights off. Don't look in the mirror, though. And don't step into a portal to another dimension. And as always, I will see you in the next one.
Hello, I'm Vincent Price. I'm here to introduce a new chilling series of classic ghost stories.
There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to
Hello.